I am Lynn, and if anyone is listening to this story, I hope you won't judge. I am not seeking forgiveness from anyone. I just want to speak out, recount the journey I have gone through as a way to free myself. Perhaps this will be a story that is not beautiful at all, a story about mistakes and losses that I caused myself. A year ago, I was also a wife, a woman who thought she was happy. My husband, Andrew, was the man I loved since our college days. We came together after many ups and downs, from when we were just foolish kids who knew nothing but pure love and dreamed of a bright future. After 3 years of marriage, I thought I had everything: a peaceful little family, a small but cozy home, and a stable job. But love is sometimes not enough to keep a relationship strong forever. After a sweet period, life began to fill with disagreements and conflicts. My husband, a quiet man, often opened his mouth only to criticize. He didn't know how hard I was trying to make everything perfect just to please him. We started arguing more often, sometimes over trivial matters. And then, at one point, I realized that I was sinking into loneliness even in my own home. That was when I met Kane. At that time, I had just been sent by the company on a business trip far from home. Kane was my new colleague, a man who always looked at me with gentle eyes and warm words. During the days we worked together, Kane was always there, sharing with me the pressures of work, and even listening to my thoughts about my family life. I knew I was wrong to let my feelings for Kane grow stronger each day, but my heart couldn't resist. Perhaps anyone who has ever experienced the indifference of love would understand that feeling. It is a feeling of both excitement and guilt when realizing that there is another man who makes your heart flutter again. Kane brought me the comfort that I had longed for. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just a fleeting feeling, that I could stop. But like an invisible force, Kane's care pulled me further away. The business trip ended, and I returned home with a heavy and conflicted heart. My heart, though I tried to suppress it, still lingered with the warm moments spent with Kane. His kindness and tenderness had become an obsession in my mind. Each time Andrew hugged me, I would remember the feeling of being beside Kane and feel the pain of having to face my husband. Gradually, I no longer felt excited to return home as I once did. I started making excuses about being busy with work to avoid coming home early, spending more time at the office, or going for coffee with colleagues. Every night, when my husband fell asleep, I often opened my phone to read Kane's sweet messages that I knew I shouldn't be receiving. We started texting each other every day. At first, it was just a few work-related questions, gradually turning into stories about our private lives. Kane told me about his life, his difficulties in love, his failures, and even the things that made him feel lonely. Each message from Kane was like a sweet stream of water, filling the emptiness in my heart. I told myself that I could control my feelings, that this texting was just a way to relieve the stress of married life. But I also understood that I was playing with fire. Then one day, Andrew discovered the messages between me and Kane. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with a gaze I would never forget. It was a gaze full of disappointment, mixed with pain that I had never seen in him before. We both fell silent for a week afterward. He didn't scold or get angry, but every time I looked into his eyes, I knew I had deeply hurt that man. We tried to talk to each other, to heal. Andrew spent more time with me, trying to change himself, and I was determined to end everything with Kane. But even though I cut off contact, my heart still couldn't completely shake off his shadow. Every time I looked at my phone, I remembered Kane and the memories with him. I felt like a guilty betrayer, unworthy of my husband's love. Our lives drifted on intention and heaviness. Andrew tried to pretend that everything was fine, but I understood that the crack had formed. My love for Andrew was no longer the same, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't feel complete. A few months later, one afternoon, Kane unexpectedly appeared in front of my office. He said that he had always thought of me, that he also felt pain when we had to stop. In that moment, all the feelings I had tried to bury surged back intensely. I wanted to run away, but reason and heart fought fiercely. In the end, I couldn't resist that feeling and let myself fall into the sweet words once again. We began to meet in secret, discreetly little by little, and this time everything was more intense, more reckless. I knew I was destroying the family life that I had once wholeheartedly preserved, but I didn't have the courage to end it. Kane became my emotional support, a place where I could pour out all the stories and sadness that I couldn't share with anyone. But deep down, I knew that this fleeting joy was just an escape, a hazy illusion that I was clinging to. And when everything faded away, I was left with regret and chaotic emotions. After my relationship with Kane gradually cooled and broke, Lynn was determined not to repeat her mistakes. But then, one day, she met Henry, a partner from the company, on a new project. Henry was a worldly man, experienced with a captivating smile and confident eyes. He had something entirely different about him. Every gesture of his seemed to have a magnetic pull that Lynn couldn't resist. Lynn and Henry often met at meetings and gradually became closer. Their work lunches slowly turned into unofficial dates. At first, they only talked about the project and small talk, but gradually Lynn began to share more about herself, about the family issues she was facing. Henry listened attentively, and sometimes his eyes had a bit of compassion, making Lynn feel understood. One day after finishing the project, Henry invited Lynn out to dinner. In the warm light of the restaurant, as they raised their glasses to celebrate the project's success, Lynn felt her heart flutter again. The conversation between them grew increasingly intimate. The looks they exchanged were no longer those of partners, but of two people drawn to each other. That night, when Henry drove her home, they couldn't hold back any longer, and the first kiss happened right at the car door. Lynn knew she was stepping into a trap again, but she couldn't deny that feeling. Her relationship with Henry became more intense. He was a mature, calm man who always treated Lynn with respect, unlike Kane. But the deeper she got into this relationship, the more her conscience gnawed at her. She began to feel that she was being split into two people, a devoted wife and a woman living in guilt. Each time she met Henry, she felt her heart being torn apart. Finally, Lynn decided to cut ties with Henry to return to family life. She tried to focus on her marriage, but the feeling of emptiness still haunted her. She threw herself into work and started taking extra courses to drive away the loneliness in her heart. In a management skills course, she met Philip, a man with a strong, determined, and intelligent demeanor. Philip had a way of speaking that was incredibly engaging, and he always knew how to make Lynn feel like a special woman. He often shared his grand goals and how he faced life. Philip's strength and decisiveness were qualities Lynn had never found in other men. Every time Lynn talked to Philip, she felt empowered and inspired. At first, their relationship was only admiration. But then, the classes turned into private conversations after class, and gradually, feelings arose between them that Lynn didn't even realize. Philip always took the initiative, and with his determination, Lynn once again couldn't resist. They began a secret relationship with hasty meetings after class in hidden cafes. Lynn knew she was going too far, but the feeling of living in those moments was too intense for her to stop. Her affair with Philip was not only a fleeting attraction, but also an escape from the pressures of family life. She felt like a completely different woman when she was with him, a person living to the fullest without having to please anyone. But gradually, Lynn also realized that Philip was not the man for her because he had never intended to commit long-term, and he was also a married man. This truth plunged Lynn into a state of despair and torment. After her affair with Philip, Lynn seemed to no longer have the strength to continue her double life. The joys of her affair had turned into deep pain, and each day she had to face herself in guilt. Lynn realized that each of those relationships didn't bring her true happiness, but pushed her deeper into turmoil. The family happiness she once preserved had gradually disappeared with every misstep she took. Finally, Lynn decided to seek help from a psychologist to understand what she needed and how to repair the damage she had done to herself and her family. After those betrayals, Lynn gradually realized that her life had changed irreparably. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman in front of her anymore. The affairs that once excited her now left only emptiness and torment. One night, as they were preparing to sleep, Andrew unexpectedly spoke up. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked, his voice deep, sounding like he had been holding back for too long. Lynn's heart sank. She hesitated, recalling all the wrongs she had done. But she understood that it was time to confront the truth. They sat together, and for the first time in a long time, Lynn opened her heart. She told Andrew everything, her feelings, her mistakes, and her regrets. Andrew listened patiently, and though there were moments of silence that seemed unbearable, in his heart, a hope began to spark. Lynn's honesty was the first step toward healing. They both agreed to go to couples therapy to learn how to communicate and to rebuild trust in each other. Lynn's journey was long and challenging. She faced the scars she had created and worked hard every day to overcome her guilt. Andrew showed understanding and compassion, gradually giving Lynn the chance to prove her sincerity. Their journey back to each other was filled with challenges, but it was also an opportunity for both to grow and develop together. Lynn learned to love and appreciate what she had, and Andrew learned to forgive. They became more united, learning to listen to each other, share their feelings, and support one another. Lynn understood that love requires continuous effort and dedication, and mistakes are part of life. The story of Lynn is a journey of self-discovery, learning to forgive oneself, and finding a way to rebuild love.